Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of the small house in Astoria, Oregon. Cassidy Rowe stood at the counter, stirring sugar into her coffee mug. The ceramic clinked against the spoon in a steady rhythm. At 34, she had learned to appreciate quiet mornings before the chaos of her workday began. "Pass me the cream." Lucas asked from behind her. Cassidy turned to hand the small pitcher to her husband. At 37, Lucas still had the same easy smile that had caught her attention 8 years ago. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles from sleep, and his favorite T-shirt had a small hole near the left shoulder. "You need new shirts," she said, pointing at the hole. "This one's perfectly fine." Lucas grinned and poured cream into his mug. "Besides, you married me for my sparkling personality, not my wardrobe." The front door opened without a knock. Cassidy's spine stiffened. Only one person entered their house like she owned it. "Good morning, my darlings." Marlene Rowe's voice carried that artificial sweetness Cassidy had learned to hate. At 59, Lucas's mother dressed like she was attending a garden party instead of dropping by unannounced. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her lipstick matched her pink cardigan. "Mom," Lucas said, moving to hug her. "What brings you by so early?" "I can't visit my son." Marlene laughed, the sound sharp in the small kitchen. "I was out for my morning walk and thought I'd surprise you both." Cassidy noticed the cardboard tray in Marlene's hands. 3 coffee cups from the local shop downtown. The woman had walked here carrying coffee. Astoria wasn't that small. "I brought coffee for everyone," Marlene announced. She set the tray on the counter and picked up one of the cups. "This one's yours, Lucas. Black, just how you like it." She handed another cup to Cassidy. "And this is for you, dear. I made you a special one, honey. Thought you could use a pick-me-up." Cassidy accepted the cup, but didn't drink immediately. The steam rising from the lid carried the familiar scent of coffee. But underneath it, something else lingered. A faint metallic bitterness that made her nose wrinkle. "Special how?" Cassidy asked. "Oh, just some herbs I've been experimenting with. Natural energy boosters." Marlene waved her hand dismissively. "Much better than all that artificial caffeine." The smell triggered a memory. Cassidy had spent summers in her mother's auto shop, learning to change oil and replace brake pads. That metallic scent reminded her of certain chemicals they kept locked in the back room. The dangerous ones. Lucas opened his cup and inhaled deeply. "Smells great, Mom." "Thanks. Drink up, both of you," Marlene urged, settling into one of the kitchen chairs. "I want to hear how the shop is doing, Cassidy." Cassidy worked at an auto repair shop across town, the same type of place where she'd learned to identify the smell, now rising from her coffee cup. Her mother had taught her to trust her nose when it came to chemicals. "If something smells wrong, it probably is," her mother used to say. "Business is good," Cassidy replied, keeping her voice level. She watched Marlene's face carefully. "We're staying busy." "That's wonderful, dear." Marlene's smile never wavered, but her eyes remained fixed on Cassidy's cup. "Are you going to drink your coffee? It's getting cold." Lucas had already taken several sips from his cup. Cassidy needed to act fast. "Actually, I think I grabbed your cup by mistake," Cassidy said to Lucas. "This one has sugar, and you know I don't use any." "Oh, right." Lucas reached for Cassidy's cup without looking. "Here, trade with me." The switch happened quickly. Marlene's eyes widened for just a moment before her smile returned. "Silly me," Marlene laughed. "I should have labeled them." Cassidy now held Lucas's original cup, the one Marlene had specifically designated for him. She took a careful sip. Normal coffee. No metallic aftertaste. No bitter herbs. Lucas drank from what had been Cassidy's cup, the one meant especially for her. This is really good, Mom, Lucas said. What kind of herbs did you use? Oh, just some things from my garden, Marlene replied. Her fingers drummed against the table. Family recipes, you know. Cassidy continued to watch Marlene's face. The woman's eyes kept darting to Lucas as he drank. There was something predatory in her expression, like a cat watching a mouse in a trap. How's your garden doing? Cassidy asked. Thriving. I've been growing all sorts of interesting plants this year. Marlene's voice carried a strange pride. Foxglove, oleander, castor beans. Beautiful flowers, really. Lucas finished half his cup. I should get ready for work. Don't rush, honey, Marlene said quickly. Sit and visit with your mother for a while. I really should get going, Lucas insisted, standing up. Thanks for the coffee, Mom. Marlene's smile tightened. Of course, dear. After Lucas left the kitchen, Marlene turned to Cassidy. The false sweetness dropped from her expression like a mask falling away. You're cleverer than I gave you credit for, Marlene said quietly. I don't know what you mean. Cassidy kept her voice steady. Of course you don't. Marlene stood and collected the empty cups. I should be going. Lucas seemed to really enjoy that coffee. The threat in her words was unmistakable. Cassidy watched through the window as Marlene walked down the street, her pink cardigan bright against the gray Oregon morning. 25 minutes later, Lucas stumbled back into the kitchen. His face had turned pale gray, and sweat beaded on his forehead. Cass, he called weakly. Something's wrong. Cassidy dropped her coffee mug. It shattered against the kitchen tiles, sending brown liquid across the floor. What's happening? She rushed to his side. My chest. Lucas pressed his hand against his ribs. Feels like it's squeezing. And my stomach. Before he could finish the sentence, Lucas doubled over and vomited violently into the sink. The retching sounds filled the small kitchen. When he straightened up, his hands shook uncontrollably. Call 911, he gasped. Cassidy grabbed her phone and dialed with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? My husband is very sick. He's vomiting and having chest pains. His hands are shaking. Ma'am, what's your address? Cassidy rattled off their street address, while Lucas collapsed into a kitchen chair. His breathing came in short, ragged bursts. An ambulance is on the way. Can you tell me what symptoms you're seeing? Vomiting, chest pain, shaking hands. His face is really pale. Cassidy knelt beside Lucas and took his hand. It felt cold and clammy. Honey, stay with me. Hurts, Lucas whispered. Everything hurts. The front door burst open again. Marlene rushed in, her face a mask of concern. I heard sirens, she announced breathlessly. What's happening? Lucas is sick, Cassidy replied without looking away from her husband. Really sick. Oh, my poor baby. Marlene hurried to Lucas's other side. What happened? I don't know. He just started feeling sick after. Cassidy stopped. After drinking the coffee meant for her. After what, dear? Marlene's voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. After you left, Cassidy finished. The ambulance sirens grew louder outside. Lucas vomited again, this time barely making it to the sink. His legs gave out, and Cassidy caught him before he hit the floor. Lucas! Marlene cried, her voice high with apparent panic. My son! The paramedics rushed through the front door with their equipment. A young woman with short blonde hair took charge immediately. What's the patient's name and age? She asked while her partner checked Lucas's vital signs. Lucas Rowe, 37, Cassidy answered. When did the symptoms start? About 25 minutes ago, maybe 30. The paramedic frowned at the readings on her equipment. His heart rate is extremely irregular. Blood pressure is dropping fast. What does that mean? Marlene asked. tears streaming down her cheeks. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately," the paramedic replied. She and her partner lifted Lucas onto a stretcher. "I'm coming with you," Cassidy said. "Me too," Marlene added quickly. "I'm his mother." During the ambulance ride, Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics worked frantically, starting in 4 and monitoring his heart rhythm. Cassidy held his hand while Marlene sat across from them, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Hang on, Lucas," Cassidy whispered. "Just hang on." At the hospital, nurses rushed Lucas into the emergency room. Cassidy and Marlene were forced to wait in a sterile hallway while doctors worked behind closed doors. "This is all so sudden," Marlene said, pacing back and forth. "He was fine this morning. Just fine." Dr. Peterson emerged from the emergency room an hour later. His expression was grim. "Mrs. Rowe?" he asked. "Yes," Cassidy and Marlene replied simultaneously. "I'm Dr. Peterson. Your husband is in critical condition. We've run several tests, and the results show signs of cardiac toxin poisoning." "Poisoning?" Cassidy felt the world tilt. "What kind of poisoning?" "We're still running tests to identify the specific toxin, but his symptoms are consistent with digitalis poisoning. It's derived from foxglove plants." Marlene gasped dramatically. "Foxglove? How is that possible?" "It could be accidental ingestion," Dr. Peterson explained. "Sometimes people mistake foxglove for other plants when making herbal teas or remedies." "Will he be okay?" Cassidy asked Dr. Peterson's pause lasted too long. "We're doing everything we can. The next few hours will be critical." They waited. Marlene brought coffee from the vending machine and sandwiches from the cafeteria. She played the part of the grieving mother perfectly, alternating between tears and encouraging words. "He's strong," Marlene kept saying. "Lucas has always been a fighter." At 3:47 in the afternoon, Dr. Peterson returned. His face told them everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We did everything we could." Cassidy felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, something deeper. Something that could never be repaired. "No," she whispered. The toxin had spread too far through his system by the time he arrived, Dr. Peterson continued. "In cases of digitalis poisoning, timing is everything." Marlene collapsed into a chair, sobbing loudly. Nurses gathered around her, offering comfort and tissues. Everyone focused on the grieving mother, while Cassidy stood frozen in the hallway. Lucas was dead. Her husband of 8 years was dead because he had drunk coffee meant to kill her. The police questioned them at the hospital. Detective Harper Cole was a thin woman in her 40s with tired eyes and graying hair. She took notes while Cassidy and Marlene explained the morning's events. "So Mr. Rowe consumed something that contained digitalis," Detective Cole summarized. "Mrs. Marlene Rowe, you mentioned experimenting with herbal teas." "Yes," Marlene replied through tears. "I grow my own herbs. I thought I was being so careful, but I must have mixed up my containers. Lucas must have grabbed the wrong cup somehow." "What kind of herbs were you experimenting with?" the detective asked. "Chamomile, lavender, mint. Things like that." Marlene wiped her eyes with a fresh tissue. I never imagined something like this could happen." Cassidy listened to the lies roll off Marlene's tongue like water. The woman had specifically mentioned foxglove earlier. Now she was talking about chamomile and lavender. "Mrs. Cassidy Rowe, did you drink any of the herbal mixture?" Detective Cole asked. "No," Cassidy replied. "Lucas and I switched cups by accident. I drank his black coffee instead." "Lucky thing," the detective noted. "You might have been poisoned too." Lucky. Cassidy almost laughed at the word. Lucky that her husband was dead instead of her. The detective closed her notebook. "This appears to be a tragic accident. We'll need to examine the herbs and tea-making materials at your home, Mrs. Marlene Rowe. Of course, Marlene agreed quickly. Anything to help understand what happened. After the police left, Cassidy sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at her hands. Marlene settled into the chair beside her. I know this is difficult, dear, Marlene said softly, but we have to be strong. Lucas would want us to be strong. Cassidy didn't respond. The funeral arrangements. Marlene continued. I'd like to handle everything. It's the least I can do after this terrible accident. Accident, Cassidy repeated. Yes, of course. What else would it be? Cassidy finally looked at her mother-in-law. Marlene's eyes held no real grief. Just calculation point. 3 days later, they buried Lucas in Astoria's Ocean View Cemetery. The gray Pacific stretched endlessly beyond the headstones. Rain fell steadily throughout the service, turning the earth around the grave into thick mud. Reverend Mills spoke about Lucas's kindness and his love for his family. Neighbors and co-workers shared memories of his quick wit and generous spirit. Cassidy stood beside the grave wearing her only black dress, accepting condolences from people whose faces blurred together. He was taken too young, everyone said. Such a tragedy. After the last mourner left, only Cassidy and Marlene remained beside the fresh grave. The older woman stepped closer and placed her arm around Cassidy's shoulders. It's just us now, dear, Marlene said quietly. We'll have to look after each other. She leaned in close, her lips almost touching Cassidy's ear. That was supposed to be you, Marlene whispered. The words hit Cassidy like a physical blow. She turned to stare at Marlene, who was smiling that same false, sweet smile. What did you say? I said, we'll get through this together, dear. Just the two of us now. But Cassidy had heard clearly the first time. Marlene had intended to murder her. Lucas had died because of a coffee cup mix-up. Why? Cassidy asked. Why what, dear? Marlene's innocent expression never wavered. Why me? Marlene studied Cassidy's face for a long moment. Then she shrugged. Because you're not good enough for him. You never were. A mechanic's daughter with grease under her fingernails. Marlene's voice remained pleasant and conversational. Lucas deserved better than you. So you decided to kill me. Prove it, Marlene challenged. Go ahead and try. Everyone knows it was an accident. Even the police said so. Cassidy stared down at Lucas's grave. The headstone was simple granite with his name and dates. 37 years. That was all he got because his mother couldn't stand his choice in wives. I'm not going to cry, Cassidy said. No. Marlene seemed amused. Your husband is dead, dear. Most women would cry. I'm not going to forgive you either. There's nothing to forgive. It was an accident. Cassidy stepped away from Marlene's embrace. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the cemetery's oak trees. You're going to prison, Cassidy said. For what? Making herbal tea. Marlene laughed. Good luck with that, dear. You're going to die in prison. Marlene's laugh cut off abruptly. She studied Cassidy's face with new interest. Well, she said finally, this might be interesting after all. Cassidy walked away without another word. Behind her, she heard Marlene calling her name, but she didn't turn around. She had planning to do. Cassidy returned to work a week after the funeral. The auto shop smelled of oil and metal, familiar scents that grounded her in reality. Her co-workers offered awkward condolences and gave her space to grieve. She didn't grieve. She planned. Every evening, she researched digitalis poisoning on her laptop. She learned about fatal dosages, extraction methods, and timeline of symptoms. She discovered that foxglove plants were common in Pacific Northwest gardens and that dried leaves could be ground into powder and mixed with liquids. She also researched Marlene's past. Lucas had mentioned his father's death 15 years ago, a heart attack during a family camping trip. Cassidy found the newspaper obituary online. Harold Rowe, 62, died suddenly while hiking near Crater Lake Point 2 weeks after the funeral. Marlene called. Cassidy, dear, I was thinking we should have lunch together, Marlene said. It would be good for both of us to talk. That sounds nice, Cassidy replied, keeping her voice steady. They met at a small cafe downtown. Marlene wore a navy blue dress and pearls, looking like she was attending a charity luncheon instead of meeting her dead son's widow. You look tired, dear, Marlene observed. Are you sleeping? Some, Cassidy replied. It's hard. Of course it is, losing someone so suddenly. Marlene stirred her coffee thoughtfully. At least there was no suffering. The doctors said Lucas wouldn't have felt much pain. The lie came so easily that Cassidy almost believed Marlene had convinced herself it was true. The insurance company called, Cassidy said. They need the medical examiner's report. Oh, what for? Standard procedure for accidental death policies, they said. Cassidy watched Marlene's face carefully. They want to make sure everything was properly documented. Well, of course it was. The police investigated thoroughly. Marlene's smile tightened slightly. These insurance companies are so paranoid. They asked me if Lucas had any enemies, or if anyone might have wanted to hurt him. That's ridiculous. Everyone loved Lucas. Marlene's voice rose slightly. Who would want to hurt such a sweet boy? That's what I told them, but they said they have to ask these questions. Cassidy leaned forward. They even asked if there were any family disputes or conflicts. Family conflicts. Marlene's laugh sounded forced. We're a very close family, Cassidy. You know that. I told them the same thing, Cassidy agreed. I said his mother adored him and would never do anything to hurt him. Relief flickered across Marlene's face. Well, that's the truth. They're still sending an investigator to ask questions, Cassidy continued. Just routine stuff. Nothing to worry about. An investigator. Marlene set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. What kind of questions? About Lucas's last day. Who he saw, what he ate, that sort of thing. Cassidy kept her voice casual. They'll probably want to talk to you since you brought the coffee that morning. Yes, of course. The accident. Marlene dabbed her forehead with her napkin. I'm happy to cooperate. There was no insurance investigator. Cassidy had made up the entire story to gauge Marlene's reaction. The woman was nervous, which meant she knew exactly what she had done. I should mention, Cassidy added, they asked me to keep all of Lucas's medical records and toxicology reports for their files. You have copies of everything. Everything. The emergency room records, the medical examiner's report, toxicology results. All of it. Marlene's face had gone pale. Why would you need all that? Insurance requirements, Cassidy replied with a shrug. Apparently, they keep detailed files on all accidental poisoning cases. Right. Of course. Marlene stood abruptly. I should be going. This has been lovely. Cassidy watched her hurry out of the cafe. Marlene was scared, which meant she was guilty. Now, Cassidy needed proof. Cassidy began building a profile of Marlene's social circle. She needed to understand who the woman talked to and who might unknowingly help gather information. She started with Delilah Kearns, a 44-year-old woman who attended the same book club as Marlene. Cassidy had met her briefly at Lucas's funeral. Delilah worked at the local bank and had a reputation for gossip. Cassidy encountered Delilah accidentally at the grocery store on a Thursday afternoon. Cassidy. Delilah rushed over with her cart. How are you holding up, honey? Taking it day by day, Cassidy replied. It's hard being alone in that house. I can't imagine. Such a shock for everyone. Delilah lowered her voice. Marlene is just devastated. She blames herself, you know. Blames herself. For the accident with the herbal tea. She keeps saying she should have been more careful with her gardening experiments. Cassidy nodded sadly. She's been so kind to me. I don't know what I'd do without her support. That's Marlene for you. Always putting family first. Delilah glanced around the store, then leaned closer. Between you and me, I think she's been having money troubles lately. Money troubles? Well, you didn't hear this from me, but she's been asking Grant Sutter a lot of questions about her investments. And you know Grant, he's not exactly conservative with other people's money. Grant Sutter managed investments for several locals. Cassidy had heard rumors about his risky trading strategies. I'm sure she's just being cautious, Cassidy said. Maybe. But she's also been spending a lot of time at Murphy's bar downtown. Not like her usual places, if you know what I mean. Murphy's was a dive bar near the docks. Not the sort of establishment where Marlene would normally socialize. Well, people grieve differently, Cassidy offered. True enough. Delilah checked her watch. I should run, but let's have coffee soon, okay? You shouldn't be alone all the time. After Delilah left, Cassidy drove to Murphy's bar. The parking lot was half empty at 3 in the afternoon. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before Marlene's silver sedan pulled up. Marlene stepped out wearing jeans and a casual sweater instead of her usual formal attire. She looked around nervously before entering the bar. Cassidy waited 5 minutes, then followed. The bar was dimly lit with stained wood paneling and the smell of old beer. A young man with dark hair was wiping down glasses behind the bar. He couldn't be more than 30, with tattoos covering his forearms. Marlene sat in a corner booth, leaning across the table toward the bartender. Even from across the room, Cassidy could see the intimate way they spoke to each other. "What can I get you?" another bartender asked Cassidy. "Just a beer," she replied, never taking her eyes off Marlene and the young man. Their conversation lasted 45 minutes. The young bartender, who must be Reese Callow based on Delilah's gossip network, frequently reached across to touch Marlene's hand. When they said goodbye, he kissed her cheek in a way that suggested familiarity. Cassidy left before Marlene could notice her. She now had 3 key people in Marlene's circle: Delilah the gossip, Grant the risky financial advisor, and Reese the secret younger lover. Over the next 2 weeks, Cassidy carefully cultivated a friendship with Delilah. They met for coffee twice and had lunch once. During these conversations, Cassidy let slip carefully planned information. "I've been going through Lucas's things," she told Delilah during their second coffee meeting. "I found some papers that worry me." "What kind of papers?" "Medical documents. Toxicology reports from the hospital." Cassidy lowered her voice. "Some of the numbers don't make sense to me." "What do you mean?" "Well, I'm no expert, but the amount of digitalis in his system seems really high for an accidental poisoning." Cassidy stirred her coffee nervously. "I keep wondering if maybe someone made a mistake." "A mistake how?" "What if someone gave him the wrong tea on purpose? What if it wasn't an accident?" Delilah's eyes widened. "Cassidy, that's a serious accusation." "I know. That's why I haven't talked to anyone else about it." Cassidy looked around the cafe cautiously. "But I can't stop thinking about it. What if someone wanted to hurt Lucas?" "Who would want to hurt Lucas? Everyone loved him." "I don't know, but I've been thinking about taking these documents to the police, just to be sure." "You think someone murdered your husband?" Delilah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think someone tried to murder me," Cassidy replied, "and Lucas drank my coffee by mistake." The words hung in the air between them. Delilah stared at Cassidy with a mixture of shock and fascination. That's incredible," Delilah finally said. "Do you have proof?" "I have the medical records, and I remember some strange things about that morning." Cassidy leaned closer. "Things that didn't seem important at the time." "Like what?" "The way Marlene insisted I drink that specific cup of coffee. The way she watched me when I didn't drink it right away. Cassidy shook her head. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe you should talk to the police, Delilah suggested. I've been thinking about it, but I want to be absolutely sure before I make accusations. Cassidy paused. I found something else too. Something I'm keeping in a safe place. What kind of something? Evidence. Documents that might prove what really happened that morning. Cassidy could practically see the gossip wheels turning in Delilah's head. This information would be all over town within days. Promise me you won't tell anyone about this, Cassidy said. I need more time to figure out what to do. Of course, Delilah agreed quickly. But Cassidy, if someone really tried to kill you, they might try again. I know. That's why I'm being so careful. The seed was planted. Now Cassidy had to wait for it to grow. 3 days after her conversation with Delilah, Marlene called Cassidy. Dear, I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight, Marlene said. I hate thinking of you eating alone all the time. That's very thoughtful, Cassidy replied. What time? 7 o'clock. I'll make that roast chicken you always liked. Cassidy had never expressed any preference for Marlene's roast chicken, but she agreed to come anyway. Marlene's house was a tidy 2-story colonial with a large garden in the backyard. She had lived there alone since her husband's death 15 years earlier. The inside was decorated with floral patterns and family photos, mostly featuring Lucas at various ages. You look thin, dear, Marlene observed as she served dinner. You need to take better care of yourself. I'm eating, Cassidy replied. Just not much of an appetite lately. Grief affects everyone differently. When Harold died, I couldn't eat for weeks. Marlene set down her fork. But eventually life has to go on. How did Harold die? Cassidy asked. Lucas never talked about it much. Heart attack during a camping trip. Very sudden. Marlene's expression didn't change. We were hiking and he just collapsed, gone before the paramedics could reach us. That must have been terrible for you. It was, but at least it was quick. No suffering. The same words she had used about Lucas. Cassidy wondered how many other deaths in Marlene's life had been quick and without suffering. Excuse me, Cassidy said, standing up. Could I use your bathroom? Of course, dear. You know where it is. Instead of going to the bathroom, Cassidy slipped quietly toward the back of the house. She had been in this house dozens of times over the years and knew the layout well. The garage entrance was through the kitchen, but there was also an exterior door that connected to the backyard. Cassidy eased open the back door and stepped into the garage. Marlene's car took up most of the space, but shelves lined the walls with gardening supplies, tools, and storage boxes. She moved quickly, examining the shelves with her phone's flashlight. Most boxes contained typical garage items, holiday decorations, old books, spare household goods. But on the highest shelf, pushed back against the wall, she found a small wooden box with a padlock. The lock was old and simple. Cassidy found a screwdriver on the workbench and pried it open. Inside the box, she discovered exactly what she had hoped to find: dried foxglove leaves, carefully preserved in a glass jar, a small mortar and pestle with dark residue staining the bowl, handwritten notes on index cards with dosage calculations and timing charts, and most damning of all, a small calendar with Cassidy's daily routine marked in red ink. Monday, leaves house 7:30 a.m., returns 6:15 p.m., 1 entry read. Tuesday, grocery store 10 a.m., library 2 p.m. Friday, coffee with neighbors 9 a.m. Marlene had been stalking her for months, learning her schedule and planning the perfect time to strike. Cassidy photographed everything with her phone, making sure to capture clear images of the foxglove leaves, the mortar and pestle, and the calendar entries. She couldn't take anything Marlene would notice if items went missing, but she now had proof that the poisoning had been premeditated murder. Cassidy. Marlene's voice called from inside the house. "Is everything all right, dear?" "Just finished," Cassidy called back. She quickly closed the wooden box and placed it back on the shelf. The lock was broken, but hopefully Marlene wouldn't notice for a while. She slipped back into the house through the back door and returned to the dining room. "You were gone quite a while," Marlene observed. "Sorry. Stomach problems." Cassidy sat back down. "I think I'm still adjusting to eating regular meals again." "Of course, dear. Grief affects the digestive system." They finished dinner while Marlene talked about her book club and garden plans for next spring. Cassidy nodded at appropriate moments, while her mind raced with plans for the evidence she had just discovered. "Thank you for dinner," Cassidy said as she prepared to leave. "It was nice to have company." "Anytime, dear. We're family now." Marlene hugged her tightly. "Just the two of us." The embrace felt like a threat. Cassidy drove home with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She had proof of Marlene's guilt, but she needed to be smart about how to use it. That night, she uploaded the photos to a secure cloud storage account and made copies on 3 different flash drives. She also wrote a detailed account of everything she had discovered and sealed it in an envelope to be opened if anything happened to her. Marlene was a killer who had murdered at least 2 people. Now Cassidy had to make sure she paid for both crimes. 2 days later, Cassidy met Delilah for their weekly coffee. She had calculated exactly how much information to share and when to share it. "I've made a decision," Cassidy announced as soon as they sat down. "About what?" Delilah asked eagerly. "About the medical records. About going to the police." Cassidy lowered her voice. "I found more evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "I can't give you details, but it's enough to prove that Lucas was murdered." Cassidy glanced around nervously. "I'm going to Detective Cole next week." "Next week? Why not sooner?" "I need to organize everything first. Make copies of documents. Prepare my statement." Cassidy paused. "The problem is, I'm worried the killer might destroy evidence if they know I'm going to the police." "You think they suspect you know something?" "I'm not sure. But if someone finds out I'm planning to go to the police, they might panic and get rid of anything that could incriminate them." Delilah leaned forward with interest. "What would you do if that happened?" "I guess I'd have to hope the medical examiner's records and toxicology reports are enough." Cassidy shrugged. "But it would be much better if the police could find the actual murder weapon." "Murder weapon?" "Whatever was used to extract and prepare the digitalis. If someone was grinding foxglove leaves and measuring dosages, there would be equipment, evidence." Cassidy could see Delilah mentally filing away every word. The woman's eyes were bright with the excitement of being involved in a real murder investigation. "When exactly are you going to the police?" Delilah asked. "Friday morning. I already called Detective Cole and set up an appointment." That gave Delilah 3 days to spread the information. Cassidy was counting on Marlene hearing about the planned police visit within 24 hours. She was right. Thursday evening, Cassidy parked across the street from Marlene's house and waited. At 9:47 p.m., the garage door opened. Marlene's silver sedan backed out, and the older woman loaded a large black garbage bag into the trunk. Cassidy followed at a distance as Marlene drove through town. The route took them away from residential areas toward the industrial section near the docks. Marlene turned into the parking lot of an abandoned seafood processing plant that had been closed for over a year. Behind the building, 3 large dumpsters sat in a row. Marlene parked her car and looked around nervously before opening her trunk. She struggled with the heavy garbage bag. Dragging it to the middle dumpster and heaving it over the side, Cassidy filmed everything through her car window. The video quality wasn't perfect in the dim lighting, but it clearly showed Marlene disposing of something she didn't want found. After Marlene drove away, Cassidy waited 15 minutes before approaching the dumpsters. She used her phone's flashlight to peer into the middle container. The black garbage bag sat on top of other trash, easily visible. Perfect. Friday morning, Cassidy arrived at the police station with a folder full of documents and a USB drive containing all her evidence. Detective Harper Cole looked exactly the same as she had 6 weeks earlier: tired eyes, graying hair, and the expression of someone who had seen too much. She led Cassidy to a small interview room with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs. "Mrs. Rowe, you said on the phone that you had new information about your husband's death," Detective Cole began. "I believe Lucas was murdered," Cassidy said directly, "and I believe the intended victim was me." The detective's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have?" Cassidy opened her folder and spread out printed copies of the medical records, toxicology reports, and her own timeline of events from the morning Lucas died. "The amount of digitalis in Lucas's system was extremely high," she began. "Much higher than what would result from accidentally ingesting foxglove tea." Detective Cole examined the toxicology report. The medical examiner noted that it was a significant amount, but ruled it consistent with accidental poisoning. "Look at this." Cassidy pointed to specific numbers on the report. "This level suggests someone extracted and concentrated the digitalis. They didn't just brew tea with foxglove leaves by mistake." "How do you know that?" "I researched digitalis poisoning extensively. I also consulted with a pharmacist friend who explained the extraction process." That was a lie, but Detective Cole couldn't verify it easily. This was premeditated murder. Cassidy then explained about the coffee cup switch, Marlene's specific insistence that she drink the special coffee, and the strange behavior she had observed that morning. "Your mother-in-law brought poisoned coffee intended for you, and your husband drank it by mistake." Detective Cole summarized. "That's exactly what happened. Why would Marlene Rowe want to kill you?" "She never liked me. She thought I wasn't good enough for Lucas." Cassidy met the detective's eyes. "She told me at the funeral that the poison was supposed to be for me. She admitted to attempted murder." "She whispered it while everyone else was leaving the cemetery. She knew I couldn't prove it." Detective Cole made notes while Cassidy explained about the insurance investigator story and Marlene's nervous reaction. "But the real evidence is this," Cassidy said, pulling out her phone. She showed the detective the photos from Marlene's garage. "I found these hidden in a locked box in her garage." The detective studied the photos of the foxglove leaves, mortar and pestle, and calendar notations. "When did you take these pictures?" 3 days ago, during dinner at her house." "You broke into her garage." "The door was unlocked. I was looking for a bathroom and got turned around." Another lie, but necessary. "These photos show evidence of foxglove preparation and what appears to be surveillance of your daily routine," Detective Cole agreed. "But we'd need to search the premises officially to use any of this in court." "There's more," Cassidy said. She showed the detective the video of Marlene disposing of the garbage bag. "I filmed this last night. She threw something away at the old processing plant behind Miller's dock." Detective Cole watched the video twice. "You followed her." "I was driving by and recognized her car. When I saw her acting suspicious, I decided to film it." "Mrs. Rowe, you realize this could be dangerous? If Marlene really is a killer, confronting her or following her could put you at risk." "I know, but I need justice for Lucas. The police ruled his death an accident, and she's getting away with murder." Detective Cole closed the folder and looked at Cassidy directly. "If we retrieve whatever she disposed of and find evidence of digitalis preparation, that would be grounds for arrest and search warrants," she said. "But I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that we might not find enough evidence to prosecute?" "I'm prepared for whatever happens, but I know she killed my husband." "All right, let me make some calls." 2 hours later, Detective Cole returned with 2 other officers and a search warrant for the dumpster behind the processing plant Cassidy waited in the police station while they retrieved the garbage bag. When they returned, Detective Cole's expression was grim. "We found it," she announced. "Mortar and pestle with digitalis residue, dried foxglove leaves, and a coffee mug with fingerprints." "Whose fingerprints?" "We'll need to run them through the lab, but I suspect they'll match your husband's. There are also your mother-in-law's prints on the mortar and pestle." Cassidy felt something loosen in her chest. Finally, justice for Lucas. What happens now? Now we arrest Marlene Rowe for the murder of Lucas Rowe. Marlene's trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecutor presented a methodical case showing premeditation, motive, and means. The evidence from the dumpster was damning, clearly showing that Marlene had prepared digitalis extract and used Lucas's coffee mug to deliver the poison. Cassidy testified about the morning of the murder, the coffee cup switch, and Marlene's confession at the cemetery. The defense attorney tried to suggest that Marlene's words were taken out of context, but the physical evidence supported Cassidy's testimony. Delilah testified about Marlene's financial problems and her relationship with Reese Callow. Grant Sutter confirmed that Marlene had been making risky investments and facing significant losses. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman under financial pressure who blamed her daughter-in-law for her son's reluctance to provide money. The most damaging testimony came from a botanist who explained the digitalis extraction process. The expert confirmed that the equipment found in the dumpster had been used to prepare a concentrated, lethal dose of the cardiac toxin. This was not an accident, the prosecutor argued in closing statements. This was a calculated murder attempt. Marlene Rowe planned to kill her daughter-in-law and make it look like an accidental poisoning. Only Lucas Rowe's last-minute decision to switch coffee cups prevented her from succeeding. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Marlene was a grieving mother who had made mistakes with herbal preparations. "My client is guilty of being careless with dangerous plants," the defense attorney claimed. But carelessness is not murder. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder. During the sentencing hearing, Cassidy sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery. Marlene wore a conservative navy suit and had her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like someone's grandmother, not a cold-blooded killer. "Mrs. Rowe," Judge Morrison addressed Marlene, "you have been convicted of murdering your son in an attempt to kill your daughter-in-law. Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Marlene stood slowly. She turned to look directly at Cassidy. "I loved my son," she said in a clear voice. "Everything I did was because I loved him." "That's not love," Cassidy called out. "That's murder." Judge Morrison gavelled for order. "Mrs. Cassidy Rowe, please remain silent." Marlene continued staring at Cassidy. "You took him away from me. You changed him." "You killed him," Cassidy replied quietly. "Marlene Rowe," Judge Morrison continued, "I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Lucas Rowe. I sentence you to 25 years for the attempted murder of Cassidy Rowe, to be served consecutively." As the bailiff led Marlene away in handcuffs, she kept her eyes fixed on Cassidy. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. Cassidy watched her disappear through the courthouse door. Outside, gray Oregon rain fell steadily against the windows. She pulled on her coat and walked toward the exit. Detective Cole waited in the hallway. "How do you feel?" the detective asked. "Like justice was served." "It was a good investigation. Your evidence made all the difference." Cassidy nodded. "Lucas deserved justice." "What will you do now?" "Live my life. Work. Move forward." Cassidy paused at the courthouse door. "But I'll never forgive her." "Some things don't deserve forgiveness," Detective Cole agreed. Cassidy pushed open the door and stepped into the cold afternoon. The rain felt clean against her face. Marlene would spend the rest of her life in a cell, paying for her crimes against Lucas and against her. It wasn't enough to bring him back. Nothing could do that. But it was enough to know that the woman who had murdered him would never hurt anyone else. Cassidy walked to her car and drove home through the quiet streets of Astoria. She had won. Marlene would rot in prison, exactly as she had promised at Lucas's grave. Some people believed in forgiveness. Cassidy believed in justice. And justice had finally been served.